Hey there, it's James with Make It Happen Greenhouse and Carp's Bees. And I wanted to share a presentation that I did today with my Kansas beekeeping group. They wanted to learn a little bit about my experience in going to the Hive Life 2022 conference back in January, and specifically to learn, about anything that I found interesting or new and wanted to share with the rest of the group. A very short little presentation. So what I picked was doing walkaway splits. So that's what this is going to be about. So let me switch over here to the presentation and we'll go through it. So again, this was in the Great Smoky Mountains in Sevierville, Tennessee. It was early in January. Left here from Kansas and took a couple days in my sweet time to get there, which kind of was a mistake. And I'll show you why. You can see here in the upper left, we ran into a bit of a snowstorm the second day of travel, and it turned out to be a once in 10-year blizzard that shut down highways and delayed me actually getting to the conference on time. But I still got there, and you can see from the pictures that I had a lot of fun at the conference. So real quick, some of the folks in these pictures, I'll just point them out here. In the upper middle is Cayman Reynolds, who put on the conference, does a fantastic job, has some great YouTube videos. He's from Tennessee Bees, does some experimentation, really into Varroa treatments, and just all around great guy and good advice for you as a new beekeeper. In the upper right, you'll see that tall guy there. That's Bob Binney. He's been around forever and one of the most famous beekeepers in America. He runs a pretty big honey production outfit, and we're talking like really, really big. But his life experience around bees, again, proves invaluable to us, the newbies, or people that are newer to beekeeping, and we can learn a lot from him. So he did some great presentations. In the middle there to the right a little bit, that's Frederick Dunn, who is from Way to Bee, and he does an every Friday question and answer session on YouTube. Again, one of the more famous beekeepers, heavy focused on science and proving things out and understanding the research behind bees, and just really good at explaining beekeeping to the backyard beekeeper, and that's really his focus. He didn't actually present at the conference, but was so accessible, took time to meet with people, talk to, and just an all-around great guy again. Down in the lower right, next to that Colorado Bee Vac, you'll see David Peck, and I believe he works for Better Bee as like their vice president of research and development, I think. But one of the smartest guys that I've ever met in relation to beekeeping. He did a fantastic presentation on the relationship between bees and varroa mite. And the interesting thing about the presentation is he looked at it through the lens or the eyes, if they had eyes, of the varroa destructor mites. It's kind of a different perspective and how we think about, the relationship between those terrible varroa mites and how they impact our bees. But again, 950 people plus attended this conference, so it was a big deal. And then I just threw in some pictures of some of the other stuff there. See my new bee suit, new extractor. There's a horizontal hive. There was way more than I could possibly put on this slide. But my point is, some of the best experts in the industry were there to answer questions, make presentations. It was just a really all around good time. So with that, I'll show you the agenda here and just pointing out some of my favorite things I put arrows against. No offense to anything else. I just really enjoyed Kent Williams talking about comb and how important it is to beekeepers and the bees. I used to go and just destroy that comb, getting the honey out, crushing it, and then rendering, the wax versus just scraping off the cappings, spinning the honey out, and then giving those empty wax combs back to the bees. I mean, it certainly makes the bees' life a lot easier and will help you produce more honey if that's what you want. So that was a great presentation. Bob Benny talking about building his third honey house. And this is quite a big operation he has, like I said. But one of the things that really stood out to me with Bob's presentation was the importance of cleanliness. He gets inspected and all that, but a lot of us backyard beekeepers sell our honey. And, really, he just stressed the importance of keeping things sanitary, and just following, some of the basic guidelines when we make things like raw honey that we sell. So I think that's good for any backyard beekeeper or smaller operator to look at and follow some of those best practices. Rick Sutton did a great presentation on this system using two queens to do swarm control splits. Part of that conversation, excuse me, was related to kind of walkaway splits. And I had a chance to talk to a lot of other people in listening to this presentation who are at my table and just walking around. And a lot of people talked about how to grow your apiary and walkaway split. So that's why I'm going to actually present in the next slide here how I go about doing walkaway splits and what was validated through my conversations at the conference. And then last, I just highlight again Dave Peck's presentation about bees, and he called the parasite and host arms race. But really what he's talking about here is the varroa mite and looking at the relationship between bees and varroa through the varroa and how they're trying to survive and evolve too. So really, really interesting stuff. One of the things, one of the little facts that I found most interesting was it appears that varroa originated in Eastern Russia. What's happened over time is those bees that originally were fighting against a varroa have developed some characteristics that help them survive. It's a slightly different type of bee, so there's lots of nuance and science to it. But interesting that if you go back in time and look at the bees that have been fighting it the longest, they've started to evolve ways to fight them and be resistant to them. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do through breeding programs and being careful with our bees is giving our bees a leg up in their fight against varroa. So anyway, some good stuff, a lot of other good things on here, but those are the ones I just want to highlight. But let's talk about these walkaway splits. So I look at the process really in 4 steps. So the first thing you really need to concentrate on is making sure that you're doing your splits from your strongest hives. You don't want to pick hives that look weak, and try to create splits from them. There's probably a reason that they're weak. Either their genetics aren't very good, they've had some kind of environmental struggle, perhaps they have disease, perhaps they're being attacked by a varroa. Those would all be examples of why they're smaller to begin with. So what you're looking for are those big, powerful, beehives. Typically what I'm looking for is, a double deep, full of bees with, you open the lid, and when you examine that lid, you see tons of bees on the lid and below the lid on the frames, on the top of the frame. So that's the characteristics of the hives that you want to pull frames from to create your walkaway split. One thing to keep in mind here that's really important is you don't want to move your original queen out of their home. So that original home. So you're going to keep that queen in that original hive. So be real careful to not accidentally move that queen to the new box that you're creating or the new hive that you're creating by doing the splitting. So if you can spot her and get her set aside and out of harm's way, I think that's really good. The next thing that you want to do is select the right frames. So if you think about what you're looking for here, you're going to create a situation where you create the second box or hive, and it's going to be without a queen. So the bees will sense that and they'll want to form queen cells and eventually get a new queen. So what we're doing here is, first of all, we need to make sure that we find a frame that has some very, very new or recently laid eggs. 1 or 2 days tops is best. And that gives the bees a lot of chance to pick which eggs that they want to give the extra royal jelly to create that queen cell or a bunch of queen cells. And eventually you're going to have a new queen emerge from there. So in addition to that, since we're going to be taking frames from an existing hive, moving them to this new hive, the bees that are foragers or older are going to want to go back to their original homes. They're going to leave, fly off, and go back to their original home because that's what they're used to doing. The smaller bees or nurse bees are going to stay put because a lot of them can't even fly yet. They're just not old enough. So you want to have lots of nurse bees that end up staying behind, but along with that, you want a couple frames of brood. So, little larvae, they're still developing under cap cells. Those will emerge and they won't know any other home. They'll be new bees. They'll turn into nurse bees, and they're going to stick around and keep helping build those queen cells out. And when the queen finally does emerge, that's going to be, her new colony. So lots of brood, very new eggs. Give her some empty drawn comb a little bit so that she can start laying right away, the queen, and then some resources. So honey, pollen, those things are good. Nectar, that's good. And the way you want to build their new home, which is the third step here, is you want to get the eggs and the drawn comb in the center of the box, then your resources and drawn comb towards the outside of the box. So that's the way you want to set it up. And that's going to probably be how you took the frames from the original hive anyway, because that's usually how the bees work. The middle is where the brood's at, and then they work their way outside to the resources. You have a couple options with the new home. What I'm describing to you is, what I use is a deep box I have a 9-frame configuration. So you think about how many frames you would put in there to fill out those 9 frames, following just what I described. But you could also use a smaller nuke box. And I'm experimenting right now with these 4-frame nuke boxes. You can see in the picture there what that looks like. So what I would substitute for resources like honey and nectar and pollen, I'd have a little less of that. And instead, what I'd be doing is really feeding these bees heavy. So lots of 1-to-1 sugar syrup, never let them run out, and they can just keep consuming that versus having to have stuff on frames. So what that does with a 4-frame configuration, you use less resources to build out that second box, but it'll work the same way. And then once they get their queen and they're ready to go, you can put them into a regular size box. Then the last step here is to actually wait. So if you think about the life cycle of bees, and the queen bee in particular, it takes about 16 days once a queen cell is formed for that queen to emerge. And probably what's going to happen is there's going to be multiple queen cells. You may have multiple queens emerge. So that's the case. They'll have to fight each other to the death. If one of them emerges early, then she's going to probably go around and kill all the other queens that are developing in the other cells before they have a chance to emerge. So basically what you want is you want that 16 days for the queen to emerge, maybe give a few extra days as a buffer. And then about a week to a week and a half for that new virgin queen to fly out, do her mating flights, find some drones, get mated, and then come back to the hive. And she may do that a couple times. So you want to give time for that to occur as well. So really, I picked a 3.5 weeks from creating the actual walkaway split, the second home, to actually peeking in there to see how things are going. There's no need to look, okay? There's not much you can do. Really what you can do is damage those queen cells if you're not careful. So just observe the landing board, make sure they have plenty of feed, and then go ahead and take a peek in 3.5 weeks and see how it worked out. I've had very, very high success with this walkaway split process. There's some other ways to do it, nuances, and you can look at those YouTube videos too. But I found this is just a really, really easy way to get your apiary growing quickly. Couple other notes here. If you open that 3.5 weeks and you see this little queen in there, don't go trying to mark her. Wait till she's fat and heavy with eggs. So once she gets mated and comes back and builds up a little bulk, that's if you want to mark your queen, that's when you should be doing that. Otherwise, when they're little, they have a tendency to fly off. When she's heavy, she'll stay on the frame usually. So less risk of losing that queen. And if it didn't work, well, you know what? You can try it again. So just do it all over again. But again, I've had a very high percentage success rate in making these walkaway splits. Actually, I think only a couple times has it not worked. And on the second try, it did work. So, and then, like I said earlier, go ahead if you're using a nuke box. Now you can rehive them. So that's what you would do. Some of the advantages of this, well, I like to think of this in terms of growth, savings, and control. So from a growth perspective, certainly this is a fast way to grow your apiary. So, if you have 4 really strong hives, then potentially you could create 4 walkaway splits. You've just, doubled your number of hives. So that's great. But again, you should really only be using really, really strong hives to do your walkaway splits. By the way, you can actually mix frames from different hives. So maybe if you have 2 medium strength hives, you could pull a couple frames from one, a couple frames from another, and put those together. Again, foragers will fly off and go back home. Nurse bees will stick around. maybe there'll be a little fighting. They'll get over it though, and they'll concentrate on building those new queen cells. If you got more hives in your apiary, chances are you're more honey, wax, and all the other goodies that come out of beekeeping. So, and then if you get really good at this, you can actually sell nukes or sell full boxes of honey. And, there's a pretty penny to be made doing that if you're good at it. From a savings perspective, well, if you have idle equipment, you're using that equipment, you're putting it to good use, and you're using your existing bees. So you don't have to go buy packages or boxes of bees. That saves a ton of money. You have to be patient though, and you know what? It might not work. You might have to try again. But if you do this in early spring or even into summer just a little bit, you should have plenty of time to get those walkaway splits developed and growing into big, strong hives. And then lastly, I just talk about control here. So think about those big, strong hives. I mean, they're packed with bees. Maybe they're running out of space. Maybe there's a danger that they swarm. Here we're in early spring, and there is definitely a danger of swarming, and you'd hate to lose all your bees. So one way to protect from swarming is giving the existing hive more space. We'll split them. That's a way to do that. So protects bees from swarming. And remember, bees that swarm have a very low percent chance of survival, well under 25% in nature. So if they swarm, they may not survive. You may never get them back. So you really are protecting them. And then lastly, you can control a little bit of the genetics here, or at least half, because if you're picking your strongest hive, your hives that are producing lots of honey, let's say, well, you're reproducing with that queen that's making that happen. So that's good. You can't necessarily control for the other half of the genetics, which comes from the drones that a new virgin queen will go mate with, unless you're under some really strict conditions to be able to control for that. But most of us backyard beekeepers don't have those types of conditions. So you can control for half the genetics, which is better than nothing. So and again, another reason that you would not want to split from weaker hives or low production hives. Try to pick the best characteristics and split from those. So there you have it. That's my presentation. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, put it down in the comments. And please, please, please subscribe to the channel. It sure does help. Thanks.